And the September 11th attacks triggered horrific war memories, some from decades ago, for many veterans.
Yeah, it's a condition called post-traumatic stress disorder, and here to talk about it a little bit and some of the treatment and effects of it is marriage therapist Sarah Gilman. Hey, Sarah, thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
You know, my brother's in charge of, he's the sales director for the new Liberty Tower and for those other 3 skyscrapers going up around it and the museum and everything, but people don't realize what was involved with that. For example, virtually all the communications for all the northeastern quarter of the U.S. were on top of that World Trade Center, and relays for every communication system. It was a really big deal, you know, that building, those 2 buildings, and you know what's going into to build them up again.
Sure, and just the visuals of seeing them come down. I mean, it's traumatic just watching them 6 years later. But you're here to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder and how the pictures in that day is really embedded in America's psyche and the bad things that can happen if you don't deal with it right.
Right. Post-traumatic stress is, by definition, a cluster of symptoms that impact us and that we respond to after traumatic experiences.
When did it first get diagnosed and get a name and become a syndrome?
You know, in the late 50s, as it really came into being something that we could call a name. The symptoms, you know, we were just talking about World War II. You know, it's not that they didn't have post-traumatic stress symptoms. They certainly did. And then but nobody talked about it. We didn't know what to call it. And as you said earlier, they just had to, you know, suck it up and pretend like it didn't exist.
It may have been even worse. I mean, they saw things on the battlefield that, you know, that although a lot of veterans may, you know, coming back from places may have never seen the kind of battles that they saw in World War II. So they just had to deal with it, I guess, huh?
And with 9/11, what they saw, those who are still alive, and the Vietnam vets and the Gulf War vets, is it triggered this cascade of memories that are stored in the brain, and the symptoms, if they had subsided, reoccurred. Our offices were full of veterans.
Let's talk about symptoms. We have a tip board with some of the symptoms that people experience: nightmares, flashbacks, anxiety, sleeping problems. All of these things are symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right. You know, when this kind of intrusive impact comes in, our brain is the supercomputer. So it gets downloaded all this information with all 5 senses. And so flashbacks could be visual. Pictures, like the gentleman on the news is still seeing pictures in his mind every time he goes to sleep at night 6 years later. It could be auditory, the sounds. The gentleman on your news, the firefighter local, was talking about the smell. 6 years later, he can remember the smell.
If anything triggers that, anything close to that smell, he
what happens, though, is that then the nervous system is activated and it has to start processing all over again. And it creates a sense of hypervigilance. People end up with sleep problems and eating problems, and then to cope with the symptoms that they don't really understand what they are, they can drink more, take drugs, prescription drugs, and develop, if it's left untreated, can develop some pretty significant disorders.
There's a small part of the population that just doesn't believe this exists. They really don't.
They think it's a weakness.
They think it's a weakness. Just, you know, you're a man, you know, or a woman or whatever. Just deal with it. Blah blah blah. But you can show some brain scans that prove this, can't you?
Yes. What we now know with our technology is that stress does impact the brain. That's common knowledge. What we also know is that the treatment, excuse me, the treatment of PTSD is successful.
So what are we looking at here?
Right now we're looking at SPECT scans, which has to do with blood flow to the brain. And so the impact of stress can increase or decrease in an abnormal way blood flow to the brain.
And we have some other pictures showing that after treatment, the brain looks different. So basically you're demonstrating that there is a physiological response.
That's an amazing difference right there.
Well, and what you want to look at here is before and after treatment. This is very exciting because this person on the left is likely suffering from a lot of emotions that they can't get a handle on, lots of anxiety, probably some sleep problems, and some physical problems. And on the right, excuse me, after treatment, a much calmer brain. So the treatment really does normalize the brain once again.
What is the treatment?
Here's another one.
Well, one of the best, here's another one. Again, look at the before and after. Excess blood flow in the basal ganglia, which is our anxiety centers, and the limbic brain, which is our emotional brain. And, you know, it just feels calmer looking at the right scan. What's the treatment? One of the most well-known and widely now accepted is EMDR, which stands for Eye Movement Desensitization Reprocessing. And what we understand now, EMDR is one of the top-rated treatments from the VA, the Department of Defense, and the American Psychiatric Association. So we have thousands of hours and hundreds of people, thousands of people who have been treated all over the world.
And is it something that you can treat and get over in a matter of weeks or months, or is this something that takes years to get over a traumatic event, which isn't only 9/11, it's people who witnessed car accidents, crimes, other traumatic things?
You know, traumatic can mean medical surgeries, can mean divorce, can mean illness, can mean a lot of things, loss of a loved one. The treatment, depending again on the person and the unique situation and how long they've gone without treatment, it really varies, but EMDR is really the most efficient intervention that we have.
Do you remember a very, very long time ago, this is probably mid-1980s, there was a soccer stadium fire in New England, and a lot of people burned to death. They couldn't get out of those stands. And there was you know, we don't always show the raw video on there, obviously. It's edited, so people at home don't always see the things that we see when we look at raw video.
Right.
And I remember seeing this picture on raw video. This man was on fire just walking. He was just completely engulfed in flame, walking until the flame just fell over. And that bothered me for so many years, you know, because of just that memory, like you say, it's there. You just keep thinking about it. So for people who've never had that experience, it's real. You know, you see something traumatic, it is a real, in fact, thing and people that need to deal with.
And the important thing to remember is that this is a issue of brain function. That information, that snapshot that you have, had an emotional tie to it because you're a human being and you saw another human being suffering. And in the brain, it goes through a neural network, and it can get stuck or frozen, which is why for a long time you kept seeing that.
And people say Time magazine cover, for example, some of those ones from the famous the 60s, remember some of those Time magazine that people remember in there?
Sure, that one picture from Vietnam of that girl
that
running.
Girl in the street,
in the street. Now, for people who have this problem and maybe want to try out this treatment, where do they go? Who do they talk to?
Well, we're very fortunate in San Diego because we have some of the top trained EMDR therapists in the country. And so one of the places to go is SanDiegoEMDR.com. And if you Google EMDR, you'll come up with the EMDR International Association, which has Find a Therapist, no matter where you are in the country. And then there's also some very good information about PTSD and traumatic stress.
Well, Sarah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gosh, you're so calming and soothing just to talk to.
I know.
Thank you very much.